He held the papers high with a cruel smile. But when three identical boys pressed their noses against the glass, calling, "Who's that man, Mommy?" his world crumbled. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The sharp ding of the service bell cut through the breakfast rush noise at Rosie's diner. Emily Turner tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear and hurried toward the counter, her sensible shoes squeaking against the worn linoleum floor. "Order up for table 7. Hank, the cook, called out. "Got it," Emily said, balancing the heavy plates on her forearm with practiced ease, 2 specials and a side of extra crispy bacon. Between refilling coffee cups and taking orders, Emily snuck a glance at her phone tucked in her apron pocket. No messages. She bit her lip, wondering if Jason was still asleep in his luxury Boston apartment or already in meetings with people whose net worths exceeded the annual revenue of this entire diner. "Someone special?" Rosa, the 60-something waitress who'd worked at Rosie's for nearly 4 decades, asked with a knowing smile. Emily quickly pocketed the phone, just checking the time. "Honey, we got clocks on every wall. That's the 3rd time you've checked your time this morning." Rosa winked. "Must be quite a fella." Emily's cheeks flushed. After 8 months, she still hadn't told anyone about Jason. His request, not hers. "It protects my professional image," he'd explained, which made sense given the worlds they inhabited. His of gleaming skyscrapers and 7-figure deals. Hers of grease-stained aprons and tips counted by singles. "Just a friend," Emily murmured, moving toward a table of truckers needing refills. The memory of their first meeting still made her smile. 6 months ago, Jason Reynolds's BMW had broken down just 2 blocks from Rosie's. He'd stormed in, designer suit out of place among the vinyl booths, demanding coffee while his car service arranged a pickup. "Do you have anything that isn't filtered through a sock?" he'd asked, eyeing the standard diner coffee with suspicion. Instead of being offended, Emily had laughed. "Try it first. Hank's Coffee has kept this place in business for 30 years. Something had shifted in his expression then. Surprise, maybe, that someone would speak to him without deference. He'd stayed for an hour watching her work and left a $100 tip on a $5 coffee. The next day, he returned without the broken-down car excuse. The pharmacy was 15 miles from her apartment, far enough that no one from Providence would recognize her. Emily's fingers trembled as she set the pregnancy test on the counter, avoiding eye contact with the bored teenage cashier. "That's $12.95, the girl said, smacking her gum. Emily handed over a 20, the last from her tip money. She'd been saving for a community college course in business administration. That would have to wait now. Back in her apartment bathroom, with its perpetually dripping faucet and cracked tile floor, Emily stared at the plastic stick, watching a second pink line materialize with terrifying clarity. "No, no, no," she whispered, sitting on the closed toilet lid, test clutched in her shaking hand. She and Jason had been careful, mostly, except for that weekend in Cape Cod when the condom had broken. He'd assured her it was fine. Emily placed her palm flat against her still flat stomach. 25 was young to be a mother, but not impossibly so. And Jason loved her. He'd never said the words exactly, but he showed it in other ways. The way he listened when she talked about her dreams of going back to school someday, how he held her at night as if she were precious. This wasn't ideal timing, but they would figure it out together. They had to. Steam rose from the pasta Emily had prepared, the table set with mismatched plates that were nevertheless her best. She'd splurged on actual wine glasses from the dollar store, replacing the jelly jars they usually drank from when Jason visited. The cheap Merlot was breathing, as much as a $9 wine could, and she'd even found a candle stub to place between them. Outside, rain pelted against the thin windows of her Cambridge apartment. She'd moved here 3 months ago to be closer to Jason, taking on extra shifts to afford the higher rent. The neighborhood wasn't great, but it was 20 minutes closer to his downtown Boston condo. Her phone buzzed with a text. Downstairs, building door locked again. Emily ran down to let him in, heart hammering against her ribs. Jason stood under the building's small awning, his camel hair coat spotted with rain, irritation etched across his handsome features. "This neighborhood is going to get you mugged," he said by way of greeting, glancing warily at a group of teenagers huddled under a nearby bus shelter. "I saw someone who looked like they were dealing drugs on the corner." "It's really not that bad," Emily said, leading him upstairs. "And the rent is almost manageable." Inside her apartment, Jason removed his wet coat, careful not to let it touch anything. Emily noticed his eyes scanning the space as he always did, taking in the second-hand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling that had grown since his last visit. "Something smells good," he offered, his smile softening his features. "Just pasta. Nothing fancy." Emily poured him wine, her hand trembling slightly. "I can only stay an hour," Jason said, checking his Rolex. "Early flight to Manhattan tomorrow. The board is reviewing my proposal for restructuring the Asian markets division." That's fine," Emily said, suddenly unsure how to begin. She'd planned a speech during her shift today, rehearsing it between orders of eggs over easy and Denver omelets. Now the words evaporated. They ate in relative silence, Jason describing his upcoming presentation between bites, while Emily nodded, barely tasting her food. When he glanced at his watch for the third time, she knew she couldn't delay any longer. "Jason, I need to tell you something." He looked up, a flash of annoyance crossing his face at the interruption. "Can it wait? I should call my car service soon." "No, it can't." Emily reached into her pocket and placed the pregnancy test on the table between them. Jason stared at it, fork suspended midway to his mouth. The silence stretched for 10 excruciating seconds. "Is that—" His voice was perfectly controlled, betraying nothing. "I'm pregnant," Emily said, the words hanging in the air between them. Jason set down his fork with deliberate precision. His face underwent a transformation. Shock, followed by something that looked like fear, quickly replaced by calculation. He picked up the test, staring at it as if it were written in hieroglyphics. "A baby?" He let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're joking, right?" "I'm about 6 weeks along, I think, from Cape Cod." Jason tossed the test back toward her as if it were contaminated. "This would be a disaster for my career. I'm being considered for investment manager. The board meeting tomorrow is crucial." "I know the timing isn't perfect," Emily said, reaching for his hand across the table. He pulled away. "But we can make this work, Jason. I love you." "Love?" He laughed, a harsh sound she'd never heard from him before. "Emily, be realistic. You're a waitress from Providence with no degree, no connections, nothing to offer someone in my position." Each word was a precision strike, targeting insecurities she'd shared with him in their most intimate moments. "You can't seriously think I'd introduce you to my family? That I'd trade my future for this?" He gestured around the small apartment with its peeling wallpaper and rattling radiator. Emily felt as if she were drowning, lungs burning for air that wouldn't come. I thought what we had was real. What we had was convenient," Jason said, standing and straightening his silk tie. "You were fun, Emily, uncomplicated, but you're boring, predictable, with nothing of value to offer someone in my position. I need a wife who will help me get to the top, not drag me down." "Drag you down?" Emily repeated, tears blurring her vision. "I've never asked you for anything. And yet here we are." Jason checked his watch again. "My taxi's waiting. I have a 7 a.m. flight." "Jason, please," Emily stood, following him to the door. "We need to talk about this, about what we're going to do." He turned, adjusting his perfectly aligned tie and checking his Rolex one last time. His eyes, once warm when they looked at her, were now cold and distant. "There is no we anymore, Emily. Handle this." He gestured vaguely toward her stomach. "And don't contact me again." The door closed behind him with a terrible finality. Emily yanked it open, running after him down the narrow hallway, down the stairs, out into the rain. She reached the sidewalk just as his yellow taxi pulled away, rain soaking through her thin blouse. Through the back window she could see Jason already on his phone, his profile illuminated briefly by a streetlight before the taxi turned the corner and disappeared. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of nausea and denial. Emily called Jason's cell repeatedly until it became clear he'd blocked her number. Emails bounced back undelivered. She even took a bus to the Reynolds Enterprises offices in downtown Boston, only to be told by a frost-voiced receptionist that Mr. Reynolds is unavailable indefinitely. When she refused to leave, security was called. 2 men in suits escorted her through the marble lobby, past curious executives who stared at her jeans and waitress sneakers with barely concealed disdain. "Please," she'd begged the guard with kind eyes. "Just tell him Emily needs to speak with him. It's important." "Sorry, miss," he'd said, not unkindly. "Mr. Reynolds left specific instructions about you." Back at Rosie's, morning sickness made her work increasingly difficult. She'd barely make it through the breakfast rush before needing to dash to the bathroom. After the 3rd time she had to abandon a table mid-order, her manager called her into the cramped office. "You're a good worker, Emily, but customers are complaining," he said, avoiding her eyes. "I can't have a waitress vomiting in the bathroom every half hour." That evening she found a notice under her apartment door. Rent was 2 weeks overdue. Final warning before eviction proceedings. Sitting on the floor of her dark apartment, Emily looked at the photo of her and Jason, the only one they had together. He'd insisted they not take pictures, citing privacy concerns. This one had been snapped by a bartender at a dive bar in a town where no one would recognize the heir to Reynolds Enterprises slumming it with a waitress. In it, his arm was around her shoulders, both of them laughing at some forgotten joke. Emily's hand moved to her still flat stomach. "He's wrong about us," she whispered into the empty room. "I'll prove it." 14 years later, when the same rain fell over Boston, Jason Reynolds would freeze as he watched the woman he'd dismissed as worthless announce an $800 million corporate merger, while his own stocks plummeted. 14 years later, when the same rain fell over Boston, Jason Reynolds would freeze as he watched the woman he'd dismissed as worthless announce an $800 million corporate merger, while his own stocks plummeted. But for now, Emily Turner stood alone in the rain, staring at the corner where Jason's taxi had disappeared, her world collapsing around her. The eviction notice came first. A thin yellow paper slipped under her door 3 days after Jason left. "Final warning," it screamed in bold letters. Emily sat on the floor of her apartment back against the wall, calculating and recalculating her meager savings. Even if she skipped meals for 2 weeks, she'd still be short $150. "Please, Mr. Donovan," Emily pleaded with her landlord the next morning. "I've never been late before. I just need until the end of the month." The middle-aged man with perpetually sweat-stained shirts shook his head. "Rules are rules, Miss Turner. I got people lining up who can pay on time." I'm pregnant," she admitted, the words still strange on her tongue. "I just need a little flexibility until I figure things out." Something that might have been pity flickered across his face before hardening again. "Not my problem. End of the month, or I start proceedings." The morning sickness came next, vengeful and unrelenting. No longer confined to mornings, it struck without warning, while carrying plates of pancakes to a family of 5, mid-pour of coffee for the regulars at the counter, even once while taking an order from the mayor's assistant. "You can't keep running to the bathroom every 20 minutes, her manager said, not unkindly but firmly. "Customers are complaining, Emily." "I'm trying," she whispered, the taste of bile still sharp in her mouth. "It's just—" "I know," he interrupted, sliding an envelope across the desk. "My sister had it bad with her first, too, but this is a business, not a charity." Her last check was smaller than expected. Not enough for rent, not nearly enough. The rejection from Jason's office had been the final straw. Standing in that gleaming lobby with its marble floors and chrome accents, she'd felt like an intruder from another world. Her waitress uniform, the only clean clothes she had, marked her as an outsider more effectively than any security badge. "Mr. Reynolds is unavailable," the receptionist had said, eyeing Emily's sensible shoes with thinly veiled disgust. "Indefinitely. Please, it's important. I'm carrying his—" "Security will escort you out," the woman interrupted, manicured finger already pressing a button beneath her desk. Two men in suits materialized, flanking Emily like prison guards. The kindlier one had whispered, "He left specific instructions about you," as they guided her toward the revolving doors. The words had cut deeper than any knife. Specific instructions about her. 3 days later, Emily sat in a crowded waiting room at the free clinic, surrounded by other women in various stages of pregnancy. Most looked as tired as she felt. "Turner?" a nurse called, barely looking up from her clipboard. The examination room was cold, the paper gown thin and crackling as Emily perched on the edge of the table. "First pregnancy?" the doctor asked, an older woman with kind eyes and efficiency in her movements. Emily nodded, hands protectively covering her still flat stomach. "Let's take a look." The ultrasound gel was shockingly cold. Emily gasped. "Sorry, should have warned you," the doctor murmured, moving the wand across Emily's abdomen. The screen flickered, grainy black and white images shifting until— "Oh," the doctor said, her eyebrows rising. "Well, this explains the severe morning sickness." "What's wrong?" Emily's heart hammered. "Nothing's wrong." The doctor turned the screen. "But you're not having a baby, Ms. Turner. You're having 3. The world tilted sideways. 3? Triplets. Identical from the look of it. See these 3 separate heartbeats? The doctor pointed to fluttering pulses on the screen. "Congratulations. Congratulations." The word echoed hollowly as Emily stumbled from the clinic into the gray afternoon. Triplets. Not 1 baby to raise alone. 3. 3 mouths to feed. 3 college educations to somehow provide. 3 little people who would one day ask about their father. That night, Emily lined up her remaining resources on the kitchen table. $273 in cash, a half-empty bottle of prenatal vitamins, 3 job applications, none for positions that would hire a visibly pregnant woman, and a bus schedule with routes to nearby towns with cheaper housing. Sleep eluded her. At 3 in the morning, she found herself scrolling through apartment listings on a library computer, each one more depressing and unaffordable than the last. The following day, Emily secured her first new job. Morning receptionist at a medical clinic that didn't ask too many questions. The pay was barely minimum wage, but they needed someone immediately, and the manager didn't look too closely at her increasingly loose clothing. By the end of the week, she'd added afternoon shifts at a sandwich shop and evening work as a data entry clerk for a shipping company. Between the 3 jobs, she might be able to afford a studio apartment in one of the outlying suburbs. The routine was punishing. Up at 4:30 each morning, at the clinic by 6, sandwich shop from 1 to 5, data entry from 6 to midnight. 4 hours of sleep if she was lucky. The subway and bus rides between jobs became her only chance to rest, head nodding against the window as other commuters studiously ignored the exhausted pregnant woman in their midst. "You're killing yourself," Rosa told her when Emily stopped by Rosie's to pick up her final paycheck. "And those babies, too." "What choice do I have?" Emily asked, too tired even for tears. Weeks blurred together. The clinic manager frowned at her swollen ankles but said nothing. The sandwich shop owner kept her on register duty when her expanding belly made maneuvering behind the counter difficult. The data entry supervisor didn't care as long as her keystroke count remained high. January arrived with brutal cold. Emily's coat, purchased 3 years ago from a thrift store, no longer closed over her 5-month belly. On the coldest days, she wrapped herself in a scratchy wool blanket during the bus rides, earning strange looks from other passengers. The tiny studio apartment she'd found was freezing at night, the ancient radiator clanking but producing little heat. Emily slept in layers. 2 pairs of socks, leggings under sweatpants, 3 t-shirts under a sweater. Still, she shivered. "You need proper prenatal care," the clinic doctor admonished during a rare free appointment he'd squeezed her in for. "Carrying triplets is high risk even under ideal circumstances." "I'm taking vitamins," Emily defended weakly. "You need bed rest, proper nutrition, regular monitoring." The doctor sighed at her expression. "At least try to work less. Those babies are coming whether you're ready or not." That night, after 16 hours of work, Emily waited at the bus stop in a snowstorm. The temperature had dropped to 17 degrees. Her fingers had lost feeling hours ago, and her vision blurred with exhaustion. The bus was late. 10 minutes. 20. Emily's legs trembled beneath her, the weight of the triplets straining muscles already weakened by malnutrition and overwork. "Just a little longer," she whispered to her belly. The street lamp above flickered, casting eerie shadows across the empty street. No cars passed. No other passengers waited. The world tilted suddenly. Emily felt herself falling, as if in slow motion. The cold bench rose to meet her, but she couldn't raise her arms to break the fall. "Oh dear." A voice cut through the darkness. Hands caught her, surprisingly strong for their apparent age. "You poor thing, you're frozen half to death." Emily blinked up into the concerned face of an elderly woman bundled in a fur-lined coat, her silver hair escaping from beneath a wool hat. "The bus," Emily mumbled, trying to stand. "I need to catch—" "You need to get warm," the woman interrupted firmly. "My car is just there. I'm Margaret Whitman, and I'm not leaving you to freeze to death at a bus stop." Too weak to argue, Emily allowed herself to be led to a well-maintained older Volvo. The heater blasted blessed warmth as Margaret drove, casting concerned glances at her passenger. "Where do you live, dear?" Emily gave her address, embarrassment flooding her as she realized she'd be showing this well-dressed stranger her dismal apartment. "That's clear across town," Margaret frowned. "You're in no condition to be alone tonight. I live just 2 blocks from here. You'll stay with me and we'll sort everything out in the morning." Something in the woman's tone brooked no argument. Too exhausted to fight, Emily nodded weakly. Margaret's home was a revelation, a Victorian townhouse in Cambridge, warm and filled with books. The guest room had a feather mattress and down comforter that enveloped Emily like a cloud. "Why are you helping me?" Emily asked as Margaret brought her tea and toast, the first hot food she'd had in days. The older woman sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes kind but shrewd. "Because someone did the same for me many years ago. Now rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk." For the first time in months, Emily slept without shivering. Morning brought clarity and the realization that she'd been saved by a retired Harvard professor of economics. Over a proper breakfast, eggs, toast, fruit that made Emily's mouth water, Margaret listened to her story without interruption. "So this Jason Reynolds abandoned you and his unborn children," Margaret summarized, her tone making the name sound like something distasteful. "And instead of seeking support, you've been working yourself to death." Put so bluntly, Emily's choices seemed foolish. "I didn't want to be a charity case." "There's a difference between charity and community," Margaret said firmly. "You don't need a man who abandons you. You need education, independence, and purpose." The offer came simply. Stay with Margaret through the pregnancy and early months with the babies. In exchange, Emily would help with household tasks as she could and commit to continuing her education. "You have potential," Margaret said, refilling Emily's orange juice. "I taught for 40 years. I recognize intelligence when I see it." 6 months later, lying in the hospital bed with 3 tiny, perfect newborns, Andrew, Alexander, and Adam, Emily made a solemn promise as Margaret took a photo of the new family. "I'll prove he was wrong. About everything. And when I'm done, he'll look at what he missed and feel the same emptiness I feel now." Years later, when the Fortune magazine published an article on how the CEO of Turner Biologics built her empire, Emily would cite that snowy night as the moment she learned her most valuable lesson. True success is never built alone. Years later, when the Fortune magazine published an article on how the CEO of Turner Biologics built her empire, Emily would cite that snowy night as the moment she learned her most valuable lesson. True success is never built alone. The 6 months that followed transformed Emily's life in ways she could never have imagined. Margaret's Victorian townhouse became a sanctuary where, for the first time since Jason's abandonment, Emily could breathe without the crushing weight of desperation pressing on her chest. "You need to focus on keeping those babies healthy," Margaret insisted one morning in February, serving Emily a breakfast of steel-cut oats with fresh berries. "I've arranged for you to keep your morning position at the clinic, but you're quitting the other jobs?" "I can't let you support me," Emily protested, though her body ached with relief at the thought of sleeping more than 4 hours a night. Margaret's silver eyebrows arched imperiously. "I'm not supporting you. I'm investing in you. There's a difference." She slid a course catalog across the table. "Cambridge Community College. Spring semester starts next week. I've marked the evening business classes I think you should consider." Emily stared at the glossy pages, a lump forming in her throat. "I can't afford—" "Did I ask?" Margaret interrupted. 40 years teaching economics at Harvard left me with more than enough to cover some community college courses. Consider it a loan if your pride demands it." That evening, sitting at Margaret's antique desk, Emily registered for Introduction to Business Administration and Basic Accounting. Her hand hovered over the mouse before clicking Submit, the simple action feeling momentous. The first concrete step toward a future she was only beginning to envision. The clinic manager was surprisingly accommodating about adjusting Emily's schedule. "Professor Whitman called me," she explained with a knowing smile. "That woman could convince the Pope to convert to Buddhism. Besides, you're the most organized receptionist we've had in years." Between her reduced work hours and Margaret's nutritious meals, Emily's pregnancy progressed more smoothly. Her body, no longer pushed to breaking point, responded with renewed strength. The triplets grew steadily, their heartbeats strong during checkups. "You have a natural aptitude for numbers," Margaret observed one evening, reviewing Emily's accounting homework. "The way you instinctively look for patterns and efficiencies, you'd make an excellent analyst." Emily laughed. A pregnant college dropout with triplets on the way? Not exactly Wall Street material. Margaret's expression remained serious. "Don't underestimate yourself. That's what he did." The casual reference to Jason sent a familiar pang through Emily's chest. She hadn't spoken his name aloud since telling Margaret her story, but his ghost lingered in quiet moments, his cruel dismissal still echoing. Boring, predictable, with nothing of value to offer. "I found something today," Margaret said, changing the subject as she pulled a book from her shelf. "My husband and I never had children, but I saved this from my sister's family." She handed Emily a pristine baby name book. "Those little ones will need names." That night, Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, circling possibilities. Strong names. Names with meaning. Names that would give her sons a sense of identity and purpose. March brought midterms and the strange sensation of 3 distinct personalities making themselves known through kicks and movements. "This one's going to be a soccer player," Emily laughed one evening as Margaret felt a particularly energetic series of jabs. "And this one's more methodical," Margaret observed, hand on a different part of Emily's rounded belly where gentler, rhythmic movements could be felt. "Like a little conductor." April bloomed with cherry blossoms and perfect scores on Emily's accounting exams. "Ms. Turner has a remarkable grasp of financial principles," her professor commented, urging her to consider further education in the field. With Margaret's encouragement, Emily began organizing the clinic's chaotic filing system into a streamlined digital database. "You've increased our efficiency by 30%, the office manager marveled. "Would you consider creating similar systems for our sister locations? We can adjust your pay accordingly." The additional income went into a special savings account Margaret helped her establish. "Never underestimate the power of compound interest," she lectured, eyes twinkling behind her reading glasses. "$1 today can be 1,000 tomorrow." May arrived with swollen ankles and the undeniable reality that 3 humans would soon enter the world. Margaret transformed her home office into a nursery, painting the walls a soft green and assembling 3 matching cribs purchased from a high-end boutique. "This is too much," Emily protested, running her hand over the expensive organic cotton sheets. "Nonsense," Margaret replied. "Besides, I've always wanted to spoil grandchildren. Let me have this." The words hung in the air, unexpectedly emotional. In the months they'd lived together, the relationship had evolved beyond landlord and tenant, beyond even mentor and student. Without either woman acknowledging it directly, they had become family. On a warm evening in June, while reviewing spreadsheets for her final project, Emily felt the first contraction. It began as a dull ache, tightening across her lower back before radiating around to her abdomen. "Margaret?" she called, voice steady despite the surge of adrenaline. "I think it's time." Within 20 minutes, they were in Margaret's Volvo, a hospital bag packed weeks earlier in the back seat. "Remember your breathing," Margaret coached as another contraction hit, stronger than the first. The hospital admitted her immediately, concern evident in the nurses' faces. 31 weeks with triplets. We need to monitor them closely," the doctor explained, attaching sensors to Emily's belly. "We'll try to delay delivery if possible." But the triplets had other plans. By midnight, Emily was fully dilated, her body instinctively preparing to bring her sons into the world despite their early arrival. "You can do this," Margaret whispered, holding Emily's hand through each contraction. "You're the strongest person I know." To distract Emily from the pain, Margaret told stories of her own youth, how she'd fought to be admitted to graduate school in economics when women were actively discouraged, how she'd met her husband at a protest against the Vietnam War, how they'd traveled the world together during summers off from teaching. "He would have loved you," Margaret said during a brief respite between contractions. "Charles always said the measure of a person isn't how they handle success, but how they rise after falling." 19 hours after the first contraction, Andrew Reynolds Turner entered the world, a tiny 5-pound miracle with a shock of dark hair and surprisingly strong lungs. 4 minutes later, Alexander joined his brother, slightly smaller but equally vocal. Adam completed the trio 7 minutes after that, the quietest of the 3, observing the chaos of the delivery room with solemn eyes that already seemed to hold wisdom beyond his minutes on Earth. "They're perfect," Emily whispered, tears streaming down her face as the nurses placed Andrew in her arms while his brothers were examined nearby. Though premature, all 3 were remarkably healthy, requiring only minimal supplemental oxygen. "He has your chin," Margaret observed, gently tracing Andrew's tiny face. "But those eyes—" Emily nodded, recognizing the shape immediately. Jason's eyes, looking back at her from a new face unmarked by cruelty or dismissal. The realization brought a fresh wave of emotion, not just for what she had gained, but for what her sons had lost through no choice of their own. On the second day in the hospital, a nurse entered with a stunning arrangement of white lilies and blue hydrangeas. "These were delivered for you," she said, setting them on the windowsill. "There's no card." Emily's heart skipped. White lilies. Jason's signature gesture whenever he'd been particularly cold or distant during their relationship. The flowers were always delivered without a card then, too, as if the gesture itself should be enough to erase whatever hurt he'd caused. "Do you know who sent them?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice casual. "Sorry, no. The delivery service just dropped them off." The nurse adjusted Emily's IV. "Must be someone who knows you well, though. These aren't cheap." For the next 3 days, Emily found herself watching the hospital entrance from her room, searching each new visitor for Jason's familiar profile. Had news of the triplets somehow reached him? Did some remnant of conscience compel him to acknowledge the birth of his sons? But Jason never appeared. No calls came. No further flowers arrived. By the time Emily was discharged, she understood with stark clarity that the flowers had been his final gesture, an elegant, expensive acknowledgement that absolved him of actual responsibility. The homecoming to Margaret's house was both joyous and overwhelming. 3 newborns meant round-the-clock feedings, diaper changes that seemed to multiply exponentially, and precious little sleep for either woman. Yet there was also indescribable wonder in watching the tiny boys begin to reveal their personalities even in these earliest days. "Andrew's the leader," Margaret observed as the eldest triplet consistently cried first when hungry, his brothers following his cue. "Alexander watches everything, taking it all in. And Adam, he's the old soul, so contemplative." On a quiet night in July, with all 3 babies miraculously sleeping simultaneously, Emily sat in the rocking chair beside their cribs. Moonlight filtered through the nursery curtains, casting silver light across 3 identical profiles. In that moment of rare peace, the enormity of her responsibility crashed over her, not just to provide for these children, but to help them become men of substance and character. "I'm going to give you everything," she whispered, her promise filling the quiet room. "Everything he wouldn't give us. And one day, you'll understand that his absence made us stronger, not weaker." Leaning over Andrew's crib, she gently touched his tiny hand. "I'll prove he was wrong, about everything." Her gaze shifted to Alexander, then Adam. "And when I'm done, he'll look at what he missed and feel the same emptiness I feel now." 14 years later, when the photographers captured the exact moment of recognition in Jason Reynolds' eyes as he saw 3 teenagers identical to himself on the biotechnology conference stage, no one would understand the depth of regret that would hit him like an avalanche. 14 years later, when the photographers captured the exact moment of recognition in Jason Reynolds' eyes as he saw 3 teenagers identical to himself on the biotechnology conference stage, no one would understand the depth of regret that would hit him like an avalanche. But for now, Emily was focused on the most demanding challenge of her life, balancing motherhood of triplets with her pursuit of education. The first 2 years passed in a sleep-deprived blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, and stolen moments of study. Margaret's presence proved invaluable, her steady hands always ready to hold a fussy baby while Emily completed an assignment or prepared for an exam. "You need to apply for the full scholarship at UMass Boston," Margaret announced one morning in May of 2011, placing a thick application packet beside Emily's coffee. The triplets, now nearly 2 years old, sat in matching high chairs, expertly turning their breakfast into artistic messes. Emily glanced at the paperwork while wiping yogurt from Alexander's determined hands. "Margaret, I appreciate it, but with 3 toddlers—" "Precisely why you need proper credentials," Margaret interrupted, adjusting her reading glasses. "Community college is a good start, but you need a 4-year degree. I've already spoken to Douglas Chen in the admissions office, an old colleague. He's quite interested in your situation." "My situation?" Emily raised an eyebrow, intercepting the sippy cup Adam was about to launch across the room. Margaret's eyes twinkled. "Single mother of triplets maintaining a 4.0 while working part-time? Universities love an inspiring story, especially when backed by exceptional aptitude." 2 weeks later, Emily sat nervously in a wood-paneled office, trying not to fidget as Professor Douglas Chen reviewed her application. The crisp white blouse and pencil skirt she wore, both purchased from a consignment shop, felt like a costume, an attempt to appear more polished than she felt. "Your test scores are among the highest we've seen from community college transfers," Professor Chen mused, adjusting his glasses. "And your personal essay—" He looked up, studying her face. "Margaret wasn't exaggerating your potential." Emily's hands twisted in her lap. "Professor Whitman has been very kind." "Margaret Whitman doesn't support people out of kindness," Chen replied with a knowing smile. "She invests in people she believes will yield returns. Academic returns, in this case." By June, Emily had received the letter that would change everything. A full scholarship to UMass Boston's Business Administration program with a flexible schedule designed for working parents. Margaret celebrated by baking a cake, helping the triplets press their tiny handprints into the frosting. "The first step of many," Margaret declared, raising her teacup in toast while the boys giggled and smeared frosting on their faces. That summer, through Margaret's connections, Emily secured a position as an administrative assistant at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, a small but growing company specializing in medications for autoimmune conditions. The pay was modest, but the hours aligned with her class schedule, and most importantly, the position offered exposure to the business side of medicine. "We need someone detail-oriented who can manage scheduling and basic correspondence," Sofia Garcia, the office manager, explained during the interview. "Previous experience in healthcare is a plus." Emily straightened her shoulders, drawing on newfound confidence. "My receptionist position at Brighton Medical gave me familiarity with medical terminology and patient management systems, and I'm a fast learner." Sophia's eyes flickered to Emily's resume. 3 children under 2? That's impressive multitasking. "Triplets," Emily clarified, maintaining eye contact. "They've taught me efficiency, crisis management, and operating effectively on minimal sleep." The comment earned a genuine laugh from Sophia. "Well, that's certainly transferable to startup culture. When can you start?" September of 2011 marked Emily's first day at UMass Boston. Standing at the edge of the campus quad, laptop bag over one shoulder and textbooks under her arm, she felt simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. Around her, students chatted in groups, many looking years younger than her 27. "Excuse me," a voice called from behind. "Are you lost?" Emily turned to find a young woman with a student ambassador badge. "Is it that obvious?" "First day jitters are universal," the ambassador smiled. "I'm Layla. Freshman? Transfer student. Business administration." Emily shifted her books. "It's been a while since I was in a classroom." Layla pointed toward a red brick building across the quad. "Hayden Hall. That's where most business classes are held. The professors are tough but fair." As the weeks progressed, Emily established a grueling but manageable routine. Mornings began at 5 o'clock, preparing the triplets for daycare. She worked at Meridian from 8:30 until 2, attended classes until 6, then raced home to relieve Margaret of childcare duties. After the boys' bedtime at 8, she studied until midnight, often falling asleep among textbooks and notepads. "You're killing yourself," Sophia commented one afternoon, finding Emily reviewing flashcards during her lunch break. "When was the last time you slept a full night?" Emily looked up, offering a tired smile. 2009, I think." In class, Emily initially kept to herself, conscious of the age gap between her and most students. But her preparation and insights quickly gained her respect, particularly in financial analysis, where her practical experience at Meridian gave her an edge in understanding real-world applications. Ms. Turner's breakdown of cost-efficiency models shows an intuitive grasp of practical implementation, Professor Winters noted during a case study presentation. "This isn't theoretical understanding, it's applied knowledge." At home, Margaret continued her role as mentor and grandmother figure. On Saturdays, she taught the boys to walk, their tiny legs wobbling as they traversed the living room to collapse in Emily's waiting arms. "Andrew's always first," Margaret observed as the eldest triplet took confident steps while his brothers watched. "But Alexander analyzes before acting. See how he studies Andrew's technique? And Adam," she smiled as the youngest triplet chose to crawl rapidly instead, "always finds his own way." Winter arrived with final exams and a crisis. One frigid December morning, all 3 boys woke with high fevers and raspy coughs. The pediatrician diagnosed respiratory infections, common but concerning in toddlers. "I have an economic theory final tomorrow," Emily told Margaret desperately, cradling a feverish Alexander while Andrew and Adam dozed fitfully nearby. "I can't miss it. It's 30% of my grade." Go, Margaret insisted. I've nursed sick children before. My sister's grandchildren survived my care. But by evening, Adam's fever had spiked dangerously. Emily called her professor from the emergency room, the sounds of beeping monitors and crying children in the background. I understand completely, Professor Bannerman assured her. Family comes first. We'll arrange a makeup exam when your sons are better. After 3 sleepless nights of rotating cool compresses, administering medication, and monitoring oxygen levels, all 3 boys turned the corner toward recovery. Emily took her makeup exam the following week, earning the highest score in the class despite her exhaustion. Your determination is remarkable, Professor Bannerman told her afterward. Many students would have used this situation as an excuse. Emily's first year at UMass and Meridian passed in this delicate balance, crisis followed by resolution, exhaustion countered by determination. Through it all, she maintained her perfect GPA and gained increasing responsibility at work. In January of 2013, Emily was reviewing monthly expense reports when she noticed a pattern in the research department's numbers. Certain reagent costs showed inconsistencies when compared against inventory usage. Either materials were being wasted or the accounting was flawed. After triple-checking her findings, Emily approached her supervisor, Sophia. I think there's an error in the research department's financial tracking, she explained, spreading her carefully annotated spreadsheets across the desk. Sophia studied the numbers, frowning. How did you even notice this? The pattern didn't make sense, Emily explained. Usage should correlate with expenses, but there's a recurring discrepancy in these specific line items. The discovery led to a meeting with Dr. Susan Chen, the company's research director, who verified Emily's findings. An accounting error had indeed been duplicating certain expenses, costing the company thousands each month. This is impressive work, Dr. Chen said, studying Emily with newfound interest. Most administrators wouldn't catch this, let alone analyze it so thoroughly. What's your background? I'm studying business administration at UMass, Emily replied, with a focus on financial systems. 2 weeks later, Emily received both a substantial bonus check and an invitation to lunch with Dr. Chen. Over salads in the company cafeteria, the distinguished researcher asked about Emily's long-term goals. I want to understand how businesses in the pharmaceutical sector can balance profit with patient access, Emily explained, surprised by her own clarity. The current model seems unsustainable. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. An important question. Most executives come from either science or business backgrounds, rarely both. That creates blind spots. She studied Emily. I need someone who can translate between our financial and research departments. Would you be interested in taking on additional responsibilities? With appropriate compensation, of course. The promotion to financial analyst doubled Emily's salary and provided the stability she desperately needed. For the first time, she could afford new clothes for the rapidly growing triplets, who now ran circles around Margaret's garden with boundless energy. One evening that spring, while the boys built block towers in the living room, Emily noticed Alexander intently studying a financial newsletter Margaret had left on the coffee table. Though only 3, he traced the stock market graph with his tiny finger, eyes narrowed in concentration. He's like you, Margaret remarked, entering with a tray of apple slices. Patterns and numbers make sense to him. That night, after tucking the boys into their beds, Emily opened her laptop to check her final grades for the semester. A news alert caught her eye. Reynolds Enterprises promotes Jason Reynolds to Vice President of Strategic Development. The accompanying photo showed Jason at a corporate gala, champagne flute raised in celebration, a slender blonde on his arm. His smile hadn't changed, confident, almost predatory, the expression of a man who had never faced consequences for his actions. Emily stared at the image, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. The pain had dulled over time, replaced by something closer to cold determination. Every class completed, every promotion earned, every milestone the boys reached without him, These weren't just personal achievements, but quiet refutations of his dismissal. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Small victories today, a promotion at work, perfect grades this semester." The boys said, "I love you, Mommy," in unison before bed. She paused, pen hovering over the page before adding, "One day, these small victories will build something he can't ignore." In her diary that night, Emily wrote, "Small victories today," without imagining that in less than a decade she would be signing the acquisition contract for the same pharmaceutical company where she had started as an assistant. In her diary that night, Emily wrote, "Small victories today," without imagining that in less than a decade she would be signing the acquisition contract for the same pharmaceutical company where she had started as an assistant. Spring of 2014 arrived with cherry blossoms and a sense of culmination. Emily stood in the university auditorium, the weight of her graduation cap unfamiliar yet satisfying. As "Emily Turner, Business Administration summa cum laude" echoed through the speakers, she caught sight of Margaret in the audience beaming with undisguised pride while corralling 3 squirming 4-year-old boys in matching navy suits. "We did it, guys," Emily whispered later, kneeling to embrace her sons as they rushed toward her across the reception lawn. "Mommy's officially a college graduate." "Does that mean more ice cream?" Alexander asked pragmatically, always focused on tangible benefits. Emily laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in years. "Yes, definitely ice cream, and maybe something even better soon." That something better materialized sooner than expected. The Monday following graduation, Dr. Chen called Emily into her office at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. "I have something for you," she said, sliding a thick cream-colored envelope across her desk. "It was delivered to me personally." Emily opened it carefully, breath catching as she read the Harvard University letterhead. "A recommendation for their MBA program?" "Dr. Chen, I can't possibly—" "Before you finish that sentence with something self-defeating," Dr. Chen interrupted, "read the entire letter. They're offering you a 70% scholarship. The rest can be covered with student loans and your continued employment here. I've already cleared an adjusted schedule with HR." Emily stared at the document, hands trembling slightly. Harvard, the university Jason had so casually mentioned attending, as if it were his birthright rather than a privilege. The institution whose name he'd wielded like a weapon to establish his superiority. "Why would they want me?" she asked softly. Dr. Chen removed her glasses, expression unusually gentle. "Because you have more potential than analysts I've hired from Ivy League schools with perfect pedigrees. Your financial models for our research pipeline showed intuition that can't be taught." She leaned forward. "You deserve this, Emily. And more importantly, you've earned it." That evening, Emily sat cross-legged on her bed, acceptance letter in one hand, calculator in the other, running numbers until they made sense. Even with the substantial scholarship, the remaining costs would stretch her budget to breaking point. A soft knock interrupted her calculations. Margaret entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "From your expression, I'd guess you're tallying reasons not to accept rather than celebrating." Emily sighed. "The financial burden is an investment, not a burden." Margaret settled beside her. "When I started at Harvard in 1964, there were 37 women in my graduate program of 400. My father said educating a daughter was throwing good money after bad." Her eyes crinkled with amusement. "I've spent 50 years proving him wrong, but the boys will benefit from watching their mother achieve extraordinary things." Margaret sipped her tea. "Besides, I'm not getting any younger. What else would I do with my time if not help raise those remarkable young men?" 2 months later, Emily walked through Harvard Business School's historic brick entrance, fighting the sensation of being an imposter. Around her, students in designer clothes chatted about summer internships at Goldman Sachs and family vacations in the Maldives. Her modest dress from Nordstrom Rack and sensible shoes felt like a flashing sign announcing her difference. "First day?" a friendly voice asked. Emily turned to find a South Asian woman extending her hand. I'm Priya Sharma, former management consultant, current sleep-deprived MBA candidate. Emily Turner, she replied, grateful for the normal interaction. Former administrative assistant, current sleep-deprived mom of triplets. Priya's eyes widened. Triplets? And Harvard MBA? Either you're superhuman or clinically insane? The jury's still out, Emily laughed, feeling some of her tension dissolve. The intensity of Harvard's program quickly established a new, grueling routine. Emily woke at 5 each morning, preparing the boys for preschool. She worked at Meridian from 8:30 until 2, attended evening classes until 9, then studied until 1 in the morning. Weekends were divided between case studies and quality time with the triplets, who were developing distinct personalities that both delighted and challenged her. Andrew touched the piano at his friend's house and played a perfect C major scale. His preschool teacher reported with astonishment one afternoon. Has he had lessons? He's never been near a piano before, Emily replied, watching her eldest son organize toy cars by color and size, a task he approached with surprising precision for a 4-year-old. Alexander's mathematical gifts emerged through his obsession with puzzles, solving complex patterns that left adults baffled. Your son completed a 100-piece jigsaw meant for 10-year-olds, his teacher explained, then explained the mathematical principles of edge matching to the other children. Adam, the youngest by 11 minutes, revealed a different kind of intelligence. While his brothers mastered systems and structures, Adam understood people. His drawings captured emotions with uncanny accuracy, stick figures somehow conveying joy or sadness through the simplest lines. They're extraordinary, Margaret observed one evening, watching the boys construct an elaborate fort from couch cushions, Andrew directing operations, Alexander calculating structural integrity, and Adam decorating with artistic flair. They get it from you, Emily replied softly. Margaret's laugh held a hint of sadness. We both know exactly where their gifts come from, my dear. Nature provides the raw materials. It's nurture that shapes them into something meaningful. The careful balance Emily had established shattered on a cold November morning when she received a call from the boys' preschool. Margaret had collapsed while picking them up. The hospital corridor seemed endless as Emily ran toward the emergency room, heart pounding. The boys sat huddled together on plastic chairs, identical expressions of worry on their small faces. "Mommy!" they cried in unison, rushing toward her. "Ms. Turner!" A doctor approached, clipboard in hand. "Your mother had a minor stroke. We've stabilized her, but—" "She's not my mother," Emily corrected automatically, then felt a wave of shame at the denial. She's family. Will she be okay?" The prognosis was cautiously optimistic. With physical therapy and medication, Margaret would recover most function, though she would need assistance for several months. The news transformed Emily's life overnight. Her Cambridge apartment wasn't accessible for Margaret's temporary wheelchair, necessitating an immediate move back to the Victorian townhouse. "You should defer your MBA," Margaret insisted from her hospital bed, voice slightly slurred but mind sharp as ever. "The boys need stability." "What we need is for you to get better," Emily replied firmly. "And I'm not deferring anything. We'll figure this out." The following weeks tested Emily's resolve as never before. She rearranged furniture to accommodate Margaret's wheelchair, coordinated home health care visits, managed medication schedules, and somehow maintained her work and class commitments. The boys, sensing the gravity of the situation, became surprisingly helpful, bringing Margaret books and entertaining her with elaborate stories. "I'm sorry to be such a burden," Margaret whispered one evening as Emily helped her prepare for bed. Emily paused, struck by the role reversal. "You once told me there's a difference between burdens and investments," she said, smoothing Margaret's silver hair. "I'm investing in someone I believe in." By spring, Margaret had graduated from wheelchair to walker, her recovery exceeding medical expectations. Emily's second semester at Harvard concluded with honors, her case study on innovative financing models for rare disease research earning particular distinction. In May of 2015, Meridian Pharmaceuticals selected Emily to represent the company at the Northeast Pharmaceutical Alliance Conference in New York. The event represented a significant opportunity to network with industry leaders and potential investors. "Pack your best business attire," Dr. Chen advised. "First impressions matter in this industry." Emily nodded, mentally cataloging her limited professional wardrobe. That evening, she found a wrapped box on her bed with a note in Margaret's elegant handwriting. "For your first conference, make them remember you." Inside lay a tailored emerald green suit that somehow matched Emily's eyes perfectly. The quality was evident in every stitch, expensive without being ostentatious. "I can't accept this," Emily protested, running her fingers over the fine wool. "Of course you can," Margaret replied calmly. "Consider it an investment in Meridian's future." The conference hotel's grand ballroom intimidated with its crystal chandeliers and sea of dark suits. Emily moved through the crowd with practiced confidence that belied her inner nervousness, discussing Meridian's research pipeline with genuine enthusiasm that caught the attention of several potential investors. "Your presentation on autoimmune treatment protocols was remarkably clear," an elderly board member from Pfizer commented. "Technical without being incomprehensible to non-scientists. We need more of that in this industry." It happened during the gala dinner. Emily was mid-conversation with a research director when she saw him across the room. Jason Reynolds stood with his arm around a slender woman in a designer gown, his posture radiating the same effortless entitlement she remembered. His dark hair now held distinguished touches of silver at the temples, but his smile remained unchanged, confident to the point of arrogance. Time seemed to stop. 6 years had passed since that rainy night in her Cambridge apartment, yet the sight of him still triggered a physical response, a tightening in her chest, a momentary inability to breathe. Then, as quickly as it had come, the feeling passed. Emily excused herself from her conversation and walked purposefully toward the restroom, passing within 15 feet of Jason. He continued speaking with his companions, laughing at some shared joke, completely oblivious to her presence. Emily studied her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman who stared back bore little resemblance to the desperate waitress Jason had discarded. Her hair was expertly cut in a professional bob, her posture straight, her emerald suit highlighting both her figure and her confidence. Yet he hadn't recognized her, hadn't even glanced her way. Somehow, this non-recognition stung more than any confrontation might have. Was she still so insignificant in his world that he couldn't even identify her in passing? Emily returned to the gala, directing her attention to building connections that would benefit Meridian. By evening's end, she had exchanged cards with 3 potential investors and secured a follow-up meeting with a research collaborative interested in Meridian's approach to autoimmune therapies. That night in her hotel room, Emily called home to say goodnight to the boys. "Did you talk to important people, Mommy?" Alexander asked. "I did," she confirmed, "and they listened to what I had to say." "Did they give you lots of money for your medicines?" Andrew inquired practically. Emily laughed. "Not yet, but maybe soon." Adam's question came last, and softest. "When are you coming home? We miss you." "Tomorrow night," she promised. "And I miss you too. More than anything." After hanging up, Emily sat on the hotel bed thinking about the 3 incredible 5-year-olds waiting for her at home and the man across town who didn't know they existed. For a fleeting moment, she imagined approaching Jason, showing him photos of the sons he'd never met. Would recognition dawn in his eyes? Would he feel regret for what he'd abandoned? The fantasy dissolved as quickly as it had formed. Her boys deserved more than a father who needed evidence of their worth to acknowledge them. Back at Harvard, Emily's project on financing models for biomedical research attracted attention from beyond her professors. During a guest lecture, the CEO of a venture capital firm specializing in healthcare investments pulled her aside. "Your approach to risk assessment in early-stage biotech is innovative," he commented. "Have you considered consulting work?" Emily smiled politely. I'm focused on finishing my degree while raising my children." "Smart," he nodded approvingly, "but keep my card. Talent like yours is rare in this industry." As Emily was invited to join a select study group comprising Harvard's most promising business students, her network expanded to include future leaders across multiple industries. These connections proved invaluable, providing insights and opportunities that would have been unimaginable years earlier. At home, the boys' questions about their father became more specific as they approached their 6th birthday. "Why doesn't our dad ever visit?" Andrew asked one evening during dinner. "Jake's dad lives in California but still comes for his birthday." Emily set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. "Your father made a decision not to be part of our lives." "Because he doesn't like us?" Adam's lower lip trembled slightly. "No," Emily gathered him close. "Because he didn't understand what he was giving up. He wasn't ready to be a father." Alexander, always analytical, asked the most difficult question. "Will we ever meet him?" Emily stroked his hair, identical in color and texture to Jason's. "Maybe someday, if he deserves to know you. But remember, a family isn't defined by who's missing, it's created by who stays." That night, observing her sons asleep in their beds, Emily couldn't foresee that in less than a decade, it would be the name Turner, not Reynolds, that would make biotechnology executives stand respectfully when she entered the room. That night, observing her sons asleep in their beds, Emily couldn't foresee that in less than a decade, it would be the name Turner, not Reynolds, that would make biotechnology executives stand respectfully when she entered the room. Spring of 2017 arrived with a promise of new beginnings. Emily stood in Harvard's historic Sanders Theater, her graduation gown flowing around her as she accepted her MBA diploma with distinction, second in her class of 427. From the audience, she could hear 3 distinct cheers above the applause, her now 7-year-old sons jumping excitedly beside a beaming Margaret, whose recovery had progressed to needing only a decorative cane that she wielded with characteristic elegance. "You've exceeded even my expectations," Professor Harrington told her at the reception, champagne flute raised in toast. "And I assure you, those were already considerable." Emily smiled, scanning the crowd of proud families and potential employers. Several recruiters had approached her already, impressed by her thesis on sustainable financing models for rare disease research. "I had excellent mentors," she replied, catching Margaret's eye across the room. That evening, as the triplets raced through Margaret's garden, expending the energy they'd admirably contained during the ceremony, Emily sat with her mentor on the porch swing. "I received 3 job offers today," she said, watching Andrew organize a game with rules that only he fully understood, his brothers following with varying degrees of compliance. "McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group, and Vertex Pharmaceuticals." Margaret's eyes sparkled. "Impressive. And your choice?" Meridian made a counteroffer. Emily handed her an envelope. Director of Operations, full benefits, flexible schedule, and stock options. "A significant step up," Margaret nodded approvingly. "Dr. Chen must value you tremendously." They sat in companionable silence, watching the summer twilight soften the garden's edges. Emily couldn't articulate the strange mixture of triumph and emptiness she felt. She had achieved what once seemed impossible: prestigious degree, promising career, 3 thriving children, yet something felt unfinished. As if reading her thoughts, Margaret squeezed her hand. "Your journey is just beginning, my dear." Life settled into a new rhythm. Emily's role at Meridian expanded rapidly as she streamlined operations and implemented financial models that increased research efficiency. The boys started 2nd grade, each showing increasing aptitude in their distinct interests. Their Cambridge neighborhood became home, with friendly neighbors who helped watch the triplets when work required Emily to stay late. The peaceful routine shattered one October morning. Emily woke to find Margaret's bedroom empty, the bed neatly made. Checking the kitchen, then the garden, a growing sense of dread propelled her toward the study, where she found the elderly woman seated in her favorite armchair, a book open in her lap, eyes closed as if in peaceful sleep. "Margaret?" Emily whispered, though she already knew. The paramedics arrived quickly but confirmed what Emily had instantly understood. Margaret had passed peacefully during the night, likely from a heart attack in her sleep. She didn't suffer, the kind-faced EMT assured her, noticing Emily's shock. It was quick and peaceful, the way most people hope to go. The boys, sensing something terribly wrong, gathered silently in the hallway, their identical faces solemn with confusion and fear. "Is Grandma Margaret sick?" Adam asked, his emotional intuition as sharp as always. Emily knelt before them, gathering all three in her arms. "Grandma Margaret has died, loves. Her heart stopped working while she was sleeping." "Did it hurt?" Alexander asked, practical even in grief. "No, sweetheart. She was reading her favorite book in her favorite chair. She was happy." Andrew, the protector, asked the question that mattered most. "Will you leave us too?" "Never," Emily promised fiercely. "Never." The funeral was simple but well attended. Colleagues from Harvard, friends from the neighborhood, Dr. Chen, and several Meridian employees. The boys stood beside Emily in matching dark suits, holding hands in a chain of support. Adam clutched a drawing he'd made of Margaret in her garden, insisting it be placed with the flowers on her casket. Afterward, in Margaret's attorney's office, Emily received the news that left her speechless. Margaret had left her entire estate to Emily and the boys, the Cambridge house, a modest investment portfolio, and personal effects including her extensive library. "She updated her will after her stroke," the attorney explained gently. "She was quite explicit that you and your sons were her family in every way that mattered." At home that evening, Emily showed the boys Margaret's journal from her early teaching days. "She believed education could change the world," Emily explained, pointing to passages where Margaret had recorded breakthroughs with struggling students, "and she believed in us." The grief was profound but transformative. In Margaret's absence, Emily discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She managed the household, maintained her demanding career, and ensured the boys processed their loss in healthy ways. At night, after they slept, she often sat in Margaret's study, drawing comfort from the books and mementos that preserved her mentor's presence. 3 months after the funeral, Emily received an unexpected opportunity. Meridian's executive board was seeking a new director of operations, and Dr. Chen strongly recommended Emily for the position. "Your background is unconventional," the silver-haired CEO acknowledged during the interview. "Most candidates come from larger pharmaceutical companies with decades of experience." Emily maintained steady eye contact. "My experience may not be conventional, but my results speak for themselves. The efficiency models I implemented saved Meridian 14% in operational costs last quarter while improving research throughput. And how would you handle the demands of executive leadership while raising 3 young children alone?" The question would have been illegal in many contexts, but Emily recognized it as a practical concern rather than discrimination. "The same way I maintained a 4.0 GPA at Harvard while working full-time and caring for my family. With exceptional organization, clear boundaries, and the understanding that both my children and this company deserve my best." She got the job. Her new office featured a door with her name engraved on a brass plate. Emily Turner, Director of Operations. The first items she unpacked were a framed photo of the triplets and a small silver paperweight that had belonged to Margaret. The position's demands were intense but exhilarating. Emily found herself deeply involved in Meridian's strategic planning, presenting directly to investors and guiding research priorities. Her financial background proved invaluable as the company navigated complex funding challenges for promising but expensive research pathways. Late one night in February of 2018, Emily was reviewing chemical formulation reports. Far outside her financial expertise, but something she'd taken to studying in her limited spare time. A pattern caught her attention. a potential inconsistency in the molecular binding projections for a new arthritis compound. After triple-checking her suspicions, she called the head chemist at home, despite the late hour. "Dr. Zhou, I think there's an issue with the RX-430 binding protocols. The configuration looks unstable under normal body temperature." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "How did you notice this? These are highly technical specifications." "I've been taking biochemistry courses online," Emily admitted. "The pattern didn't look right based on the stability metrics from our previous compounds." A comprehensive review confirmed Emily's suspicions. The compound would have caused severe liver complications if it had progressed to human trials, potentially devastating both patients and Meridian's reputation. The discovery saved the company millions in development costs and potential lawsuits. The following week, the CEO called Emily to his office. "You've prevented a disaster that most financial executives wouldn't have even looked for, let alone identified," he said, sliding a document across the desk. "The board has approved an exceptional performance bonus." The check's amount, $250,000, momentarily took Emily's breath away. It represented more money than she had seen at one time in her entire life. That evening, the boys noticed her unusual quietness at dinner. "Did something bad happen at work, Mom?" Adam asked, his emotional radar finely tuned as always. Emily smiled, shaking her head. "Actually, something good happened. I helped prevent a mistake that could have hurt people." "Did you get a reward?" Andrew asked practically. "When I found Mrs. Peterson's cat, she gave me $20. "Yes, I received a bonus," Emily admitted. "Enough that we can make some changes." Alexander's analytical mind immediately began calculating possibilities. "Like a bigger house? Or a car that doesn't make that funny noise?" "Maybe both," Emily laughed. "But also something for the future, for college, and maybe something else I've been thinking about." That night, after the boys were asleep, Emily sat in Margaret's study, now hers, and began sketching what would become the business plan for Turner Biologics. The idea had been forming gradually, a company focused on innovative treatments for autoimmune conditions built on principles of accessibility and sustainability that larger pharmaceuticals often neglected. Meridian was doing important work, but Emily increasingly saw limitations in the traditional pharmaceutical model. Margaret's notes on alternative approaches to inflammatory conditions, research she'd collected from her brother, a botanist, had sparked ideas that wouldn't let Emily rest. As spring turned to summer, the boys turned 8, celebrating with a science-themed party that showcased their growing personalities. Andrew organized games with impressive leadership, Alexander won every math-based challenge, and Adam created personalized cards for each guest that somehow perfectly captured their personalities. The questions about their absent father became more specific and difficult to answer. Jake's dad left when he was a baby, but he still visits on holidays, Andrew mentioned one evening during dinner. "Why doesn't our dad ever visit?" Emily set down her fork, giving the question the respect it deserved. "Your father made a choice not to be part of our lives when I told him I was pregnant." "Because he didn't want us?" Adam's sensitivity made the question particularly painful. "He didn't know you," Emily clarified, choosing her words carefully. "He made his decision before you were born, before he could understand what amazing people you would become." Alexander, always logical, followed the implications. "But he could find us now if he wanted to. We have the same last name as you." "Yes, he could," Emily acknowledged, "and perhaps someday he will, if he realizes what he's missing. But we've built a wonderful life without him, haven't we?" Later, checking on the sleeping boys, Emily noticed Alexander had been researching online. His tablet history showed searches for Reynolds Enterprises and Jason Reynolds CEO. Her heart constricted, but she respected his curiosity too much to confront him. Instead, she gently tucked the tablet aside and pulled his blanket higher. "You look like him," she whispered, stroking his dark hair so similar to Jason's. "But your heart is entirely your own." Late that night, Emily worked on her business plan, incorporating notes from Margaret's research and innovations she'd observed at Meridian. As a memorial to her mentor and a promise to her son, she titled the document, "Turner Biologics, A New Approach to Healing." When she received her substantial bonus, Emily opened a specific bank account labeled Turner Biologics Future, making the first deposit toward what still felt like an impossible dream. While depositing that first significant check, Emily didn't imagine that in just 4 years she would be negotiating at the same bank for an 8-figure loan to expand the company that still existed only in her mind. While depositing that first significant check, Emily didn't imagine that in just 4 years she would be negotiating at the same bank for an 8-figure loan to expand the company that still existed only in her mind. May of 2019 marked a turning point. Emily sat at the mahogany desk in what had been Margaret's study, now converted to her home office, reviewing the finalized business plan for Turner Biologics one last time. The weight of the decision pressed against her chest, leaving the security of Meridian, investing Margaret's inheritance and her own savings, risking everything on an idea that might fail. "Mom?" Alexander's voice interrupted her thoughts. At 9 years old, he stood in the doorway with uncharacteristic hesitation, a textbook clutched to his chest. "Are you really going to start your own company?" Emily beckoned him closer. "I'm considering it. What do you think about that?" Alexander climbed onto her lap, though he was getting almost too big for such gestures. "I calculated the probability of success based on biotech startup statistics," he said with complete seriousness. "It's lower than 50%. A laugh escaped her. "You researched that?" "In the library database," he confirmed. "But I also calculated your personal success metrics, which exceed industry averages by 67%. So the adjusted probability is favorable." Emily hugged him tightly, marveling at the brilliant mind developing in this child whom Jason had never bothered to know. "Thank you for the analysis. That helps." 2 weeks later, Emily Turner resigned from Meridian Pharmaceuticals. Dr. Chen responded with disappointment but not surprise. "I've been expecting this," she admitted. "You've outgrown us. But remember, the pharmaceutical world is small. Our paths will cross again." With the inheritance from Margaret, her savings, performance bonus, and a bank loan secured against the Cambridge house, Emily incorporated Turner Biologics in July of 2019. At 31, she became one of the youngest female founders in Boston's competitive biotech sector. The beginning was humble: 3 employees in a small laboratory space rented in a converted warehouse in Somerville. Dr. Lakshmi Patel, a brilliant immunologist who had been overlooked for promotion at a larger pharmaceutical company, became Turner's first scientific hire. "Your vision for targeted protein therapies is exactly what drew me to immunology," Dr. Patel said during her interview. "But every company I've worked for abandons promising research when quarterly profits dip." Emily leaned forward. "I'm building something different. Sustainable research that doesn't sacrifice innovation for short-term gains." "Everyone says that," Dr. Patel replied skeptically. "I'm not everyone," Emily countered. "I've structured this company so research decisions aren't exclusively driven by financial pressures. We're privately held with no venture capital demanding quick returns." Dr. Patel studied her for a long moment. "You really believe you can change how this industry works?" "I believe we can try," Emily answered honestly. "And I'd rather fail at something meaningful than succeed at perpetuating a broken system." The first months tested that conviction severely. A critical centrifuge malfunctioned 2 weeks after their launch, threatening to derail preliminary research. The replacement cost represented nearly 10% of their operating budget. Emily sat at her makeshift desk, a door balanced on filing cabinets, running calculations until midnight. The next morning, she visited her bank to arrange a second mortgage on the Cambridge house. "This equipment is essential," she explained to her nervous employees. "Science doesn't work without tools." By October, the team had expanded to include Dr. Zhou, a medicinal chemist Emily had recruited from Meridian, and 2 recent MIT graduates eager to work in a startup environment. Their focus, developing novel treatments for autoimmune conditions based partly on compounds identified in Margaret's brother's botanical research, progressed in fits and starts. For Emily, the days blurred together in a punishing rhythm. She woke at 5 to prepare the boys for school, worked at the lab until their afternoon dismissal, spent evenings helping with homework and bedtime routines, then returned to financial planning and regulatory paperwork until she fell asleep at her desk, often past midnight. The triplets, now approaching 10, showed remarkable resilience and maturity. They established a rotating chore system without being asked, prepared simple meals when Emily worked late, and limited their complaints about her frequent absences. "We're helping build something important," Andrew told his brothers when Adam expressed sadness over another missed school performance. "Mom's company will help sick people get better." In November, Turner Biologics faced its first major crisis. Emily was reviewing expense reports when she noticed the company had less than 2 months of operating capital remaining. 3 experiments had failed consecutively, burning through resources with nothing to show investors. That night, after the boys were asleep, Emily sat on her kitchen floor and allowed herself 5 minutes of pure, unrestricted panic. Then she washed her face, straightened her shoulders, and began making calls to potential investors. The presentations that followed were exercises in controlled desperation. Emily met with skeptical venture capitalists who questioned both her experience and her approach to autoimmune research. "Your background is primarily financial, not scientific," one silver-haired investor noted dismissively, "and your research director lacks publications in top-tier journals." "What Dr. Patel lacks in publications, she makes up for in practical innovation," Emily countered, "and my financial background means I understand how to make breakthrough science economically viable." After 12 rejections, Emily secured a meeting with Horizon Ventures, a smaller firm known for supporting female entrepreneurs. Their representative, Maya Williams, visited the lab on a snowy December morning. "Show me what makes Turner different," she requested, skipping pleasantries. Dr. Patel guided her through their research approach, explaining how traditional pharmaceuticals targeted symptoms rather than underlying immune dysregulation. Emily followed with a detailed financial model showing pathways to sustainability even with longer research timelines. Walking through the modest lab, Maya stopped at a wall covered with photographs, patients with various autoimmune conditions alongside scientific illustrations of the proteins Turner was targeting. "What's this?" she asked, gesturing to the display. "Reminders of why we're here," Emily explained. "Every scientific decision we make affects real people waiting for solutions." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "Most labs I visit have publication lists or patent displays. You have faces." 2 weeks later, Horizon offered $5 million in seed funding, enough to keep Turner operational for 18 months and purchase essential equipment. The terms were fair, with Horizon taking a 20% stake but leaving control firmly in Emily's hands. "You've done more with less than any startup I've evaluated," Maya explained when Emily expressed surprise at the favorable terms. "Imagine what you'll accomplish with proper resources." January of 2020 brought the first significant breakthrough. Dr. Joe burst into Emily's office, lab coat flapping, eyes wide with excitement. "The TB-117 compound worked," he exclaimed, waving printouts of test results. 94% reduction in inflammatory markers with minimal off-target effects. The team gathered around the conference table, really just a folding table with mismatched chairs, to review the data. The compound, derived from a tropical plant identified in Margaret's brother's notes and modified using Turner's proprietary process, showed remarkable promise for treating rheumatoid arthritis. "We need to verify with a larger sample," Dr. Patel cautioned, though her eyes betrayed her excitement. "And the delivery mechanism needs refinement." "Of course," Emily agreed, "but this deserves celebration." That weekend, Emily took the triplets to their favorite science museum, followed by ice cream despite the January cold. Watching them race between exhibits, she felt a momentary pang. These remarkable boys deserved more time with her than the demanding startup allowed. "Are you sad, Mom?" Adam asked, his emotional intuition sharp as always. Emily smiled, ruffling his hair. "Just thinking how lucky I am to have you three." "Is your company going to be successful now?" Alexander inquired pragmatically. "We're making progress," Emily answered honestly. "Science takes time." "But you're helping people," Andrew affirmed confidently. "That's what matters." February brought another milestone, a presentation to Biomedical Innovation Partners, a prestigious venture capital firm specializing in pharmaceutical investments. Emily and Dr. Patel presented TB-117's preliminary results to a panel of industry veterans. "These inflammatory reduction rates are impressive," the lead investor acknowledged. "But reproducibility is critical. What's your timeline for expanded trials?" Emily outlined their careful approach to validation, emphasizing quality over speed. The strategy resonated. 2 days later, Biomedical offered $8 million in second-round funding in exchange for 15% equity. "Your presentation convinced them you're building for long-term value, not a quick exit," Maya told Emily over coffee afterward. "That's rare in this ecosystem." The infusion of capital allowed Turner to move to larger facilities in March, a modern laboratory space in Cambridge with actual offices instead of partitioned corners. The expanded team now included 15 scientists and 3 administrative staff, with plans to hire more immunologists and biochemists. Then the pandemic hit. Emily watched with growing concern as global health systems buckled under the pressure of COVID-19. Schools closed, laboratories faced restrictions, and pharmaceutical research not related to the virus slowed dramatically. "We need to adapt," Emily told her team during an emergency Zoom meeting in April. "Our work on inflammatory pathways might have applications for COVID complications." Over the next month, Turner Biologics pivoted part of its research toward cytokine storm interventions, the dangerous immune overreaction affecting severe COVID patients. Dr. Patel redirected 3 researchers to focus exclusively on adapting TB-117 to address this specific inflammatory cascade. The gamble paid off. By June, Turner had preliminary data showing their modified compound might reduce the severity of cytokine storms without compromising necessary immune functions. The findings attracted attention from government agencies desperate for treatment options. "We've received interest from NIH," Emily announced to the team during a socially distanced meeting in the parking lot. "They're offering emergency research funding to accelerate development." The government contract finalized in July provided $5 million in immediate funding with the possibility of an additional $15 million if preliminary clinical results proved promising. The validation transformed Turner Biologics overnight from struggling startup to recognized innovator. "We can hire 5 more researchers," Emily told Dr. Patel and Dr. Joe as they reviewed the contract terms, "and upgrade the protein sequencing equipment." The expansion necessitated another move, this time to a dedicated building in Kendall Square, the heart of Cambridge's biotech corridor. By September of 2020, Turner Biologics employed 30 scientists across immunology, biochemistry, and clinical research divisions. At the building's opening ceremony, held outdoors with masks and distancing, Emily gave a brief speech to her team. "We began with an idea and determination," she said, looking across the faces that had taken a chance on her vision. "Today, we're 30 people working toward treatments that could change lives. This is just the beginning." At home in Burlington, the delicate balance of motherhood and leadership grew increasingly complex. The triplets, now in 5th grade and attending school remotely, needed supervision and support with online learning. Emily created designated workspace in the living room, checking in between Zoom meetings and investor calls. "I know this is hard," she told the boys during a rare family dinner when all 4 were actually seated together. "But I'm so proud of how you're handling everything." "We understand, Mom," Andrew assured her, his leadership qualities emerging more strongly each year. "Your work is important. Plus, we figured out how to make the teaching assistant do most of the work for us," Alexander added with a mischievous grin. In December, Scientific American published a profile of emerging biotechnology companies addressing pandemic challenges. Turner Biologics, led by CEO Emily Turner, represents a new generation of nimble research organizations redefining treatment approaches for inflammatory conditions, the article stated. Their innovative funding model balances profit imperatives with research integrity. Emily printed the article and tucked it away in her desk drawer, next to the business plan she'd drafted in Margaret's study. The company that had existed only in her mind now employed dozens, held multiple patents, and attracted attention from industry leaders who once would have dismissed her as unqualified. On the third anniversary of Turner Biologics, with 120 employees and a market valuation of $90 million, Emily didn't imagine that in less than 2 years, she would be standing face-to-face with the man who had called her worthless, now commanding an empire valued at more than $300 million. On the third anniversary of Turner Biologics, with 120 employees and a market valuation of $90 million, Emily didn't imagine that in less than 2 years, she would be standing face-to-face with the man who had called her worthless, now commanding an empire valued at more than $300 million. Spring of 2023 arrived with a breathtaking momentum. Emily stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, watching Cambridge's biotech corridor come alive in the morning light. The view from the 20th floor of Turner Biologics headquarters offered a panorama of the city where she had once wandered homeless and pregnant, desperate for any opportunity. Now, at 39, that desperate young woman seemed like someone from another lifetime. "Ms. Turner?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The Pfizer executives are assembled in the conference room. They're ready whenever you are." Emily smoothed her hand over her crimson Armani blazer, a recent indulgence she'd permitted herself after the preliminary acquisition talks had begun. "Tell them 5 minutes, please." She turned to the mirror behind her door, studying her reflection critically. The years had been kind, despite the relentless pace she'd maintained. Her chestnut hair, now cut in a sophisticated bob with subtle highlights, framed a face that had traded youthful softness for defined elegance. The woman who gazed back at her exuded something that had been absent 14 years ago, absolute certainty in her own worth. Her phone vibrated with a text from Andrew. "Crushed the violin audition. Carnegie Hall confirmed for next month." Emily smiled, typing back quickly. "Never doubted you for a second. Celebrating tonight." At 14, the triplets had blossomed into remarkable young men, each cultivating their unique talents while maintaining the tight bond that had always connected them. Andrew's musical gifts had progressed from childhood piano lessons to international recognition as a violin prodigy. Alexander dominated the national debate circuit, his analytical mind dismantling opponents' arguments with surgical precision. Adam, the gentlest of the three, had published a science education app downloaded over 1 million times, channeling his artistic sensibility into accessible learning tools. The conference room fell silent as Emily entered, 12 executives in expensive suits straightening almost imperceptibly in their chairs. The deference still occasionally surprised her, this reflexive acknowledgement of her status in an industry where she had once been invisible. "Good morning," she greeted them, taking her position at the head of the table. "I believe we're discussing final valuation metrics today." The Pfizer CEO, James Thornton, nodded respectfully. "Our board has reviewed the complete portfolio and proprietary processes. We're prepared to increase our offer to $800 million, with the retention structure we discussed for your key research personnel." The figure hung in the air for a moment. $800 million. Even after 3 years of explosive growth and multiple acquisition approaches, the number still felt unreal. Emily maintained her composed expression, though her mind flashed briefly to the cramped apartment where Jason had told her she had nothing of value to offer. "That alignment reflects the true worth of what we've built," she replied evenly. "I'll need to review the final terms with our counsel, but I believe we have the framework for an agreement." The meeting continued for another hour, details of the acquisition mapped out with precision. Throughout, Emily felt a strange sense of completion. Turner Biologics had revolutionized treatment approaches for 3 autoimmune conditions, with 4 more therapies in advanced trials. The Pfizer acquisition would provide the global infrastructure to deliver these treatments worldwide, exactly the outcome she had outlined in her original business plan. As the executives filed out, James lingered. "I've been in this industry 30 years, Emily. What you've built in less than 5 is unprecedented. Most founders in your position are already planning their next venture. Are you?" Emily smiled diplomatically. "Let's complete this transition successfully first. Then we'll see what's next." Back in her office, Emily found an urgent message from her home security system. The notification showed footage of a courier delivering an official-looking envelope to her Burlington residence. Something about the county seal visible on the package sent a ripple of unease through her. "Sarah," she called to her assistant, "could you have someone collect a delivery from my house? It seems important." "Already handled," Sarah replied efficiently. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, called about it. Jordan is bringing it now." 30 minutes later, Emily stared at the document in disbelief. The Burlington Development Corporation had acquired the entire subdivision where her home was located. All residents were being issued eviction notices, with 6 months to relocate before demolition would begin for a luxury condominium development. "This can't be right," she murmured, scanning the legal language. The corporation name wasn't familiar, but something about the letterhead nagged at her memory. "Sarah, can you research Burlington Development Corporation? I need to know who's behind it." As Sarah departed, Emily's phone rang with the special tone reserved for the triplets. "Hey, sweetie," she answered, expecting Andrew with more news about his audition. Instead, Alexander's precise, analytical voice came through. "Mom, I just got a notification about our house. Are we being evicted?" "Not exactly," Emily assured him, impressed as always by his information network. "It's a development notice, but we have options. Nothing to worry about." "The company was just incorporated 3 months ago," Alexander continued, clearly already deep into research. "It's registered as a subsidiary of something called Reynolds Enterprises Holding Group." Emily's blood turned to ice. Reynolds. After 14 years without a word, without a single attempt to contact his sons, Jason Reynolds was unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, trying to demolish their home. "Alexander, I need to call you back," she managed, keeping her voice steady. "Everything's fine. I promise." Her mind raced through possibilities. Could it be coincidence? Burlington was a desirable suburb, and development companies acquired properties there regularly. But the timing, just as Turner Biologics prepared to announce its landmark acquisition, strained credibility. Sarah returned, tablet in hand. Burlington Development Corporation was incorporated in February, wholly owned by Reynolds Enterprises. Their CEO is Jason Reynolds, Emily finished quietly. "Yes," Sarah confirmed, looking surprised. "He's actually speaking at the Biotech Innovation Conference tomorrow, the same one where we're announcing the Pfizer acquisition. His PR team has been promoting Reynolds Enterprises' expansion into the biotechnology sector." Emily's fingers tightened around the eviction notice. After 14 years of silence, she would be in the same room as Jason tomorrow. The universe had a perverse sense of timing. "Is everything all right?" Sarah asked, noting her tension. Emily relaxed her grip, smoothing the paper carefully. "Perfectly fine. An unexpected complication, that's all." She reached for her phone. "Could you confirm the children's transportation to tomorrow's announcement? I'd like them there for the press conference." That evening, Emily arrived home to find all 3 boys huddled around Alexander's laptop, clearly deep into investigation. Reynolds Enterprises is valued at approximately $600 million, Alexander was explaining to his brothers, though their stock has dropped 11% in the last quarter due to failed acquisitions in the energy sector. That's their entire corporation? Andrew clarified, always focused on relative standings. Mom's company alone is worth more than that now. Is he trying to compete with Mom's company? Adam asked, his emotional intelligence cutting to the heart of the matter as always. Emily set down her briefcase, clearing her throat. The three identical faces turned toward her, each a mirror of Jason's at 14, with the same sharp cheekbones and intense eyes, yet softened by something Jason had always lacked: genuine empathy. "I see you've been researching our new developers," she observed mildly. Alexander had the grace to look slightly abashed. The name Reynolds triggered a pattern match with previous searches I'd done. Of course, Alexander had been researching his father for years, cataloging information while rarely asking direct questions. "Is Reynolds Enterprises connected to our father?" he asked directly, abandoning pretense. Emily took a deep breath. She had always promised herself she would answer honestly when they asked. "Yes, Jason Reynolds is the CEO of Reynolds Enterprises, and yes, he is your biological father." A heavy silence filled the room. "Is he trying to hurt us?" Adam asked quietly. "By taking our home?" "No," Emily assured him, though uncertainty flickered at the edges of her confidence. "He likely has no idea we live here. It's a business decision, nothing more." Andrew's expression hardened in a way that reminded her painfully of Jason. "He abandoned us, and now he's trying to bulldoze our house. Seems personal to me." "It doesn't matter," Emily said firmly. "I've been in negotiations for a property in Beacon Hill for months. The timing is actually perfect. We can move after your school year ends." "Beacon Hill?" Alexander's eyebrows shot up. "Those properties start at $15 million. Emily smiled. "I'm aware of the real estate values, thank you. Now, more importantly, you're all attending the press conference tomorrow. Andrew, your Carnegie Hall acceptance will be mentioned. Alexander, several board members want to discuss your MIT summer application. And Adam, the education division at Pfizer, is particularly interested in your app's methodology." Later that night, after the boys had retired to their rooms, Emily sat at her vanity, methodically removing her makeup. The woman in the mirror looked collected, but her mind whirled with memories and calculations. After 14 years of building her life and protecting her children, she would face Jason again, not as the desperate waitress he had discarded, but as a peer. No, if she was honest with herself, as his superior in the industry, he had once lorded over her. Emily opened her closet, fingers trailing over options before stopping at a recent purchase she had been saving for a special occasion. The red designer dress was elegant but commanding, nothing like the worn uniform she'd been wearing the last time Jason saw her. Her phone pinged with a banking notification. She opened the app to confirm the deposit from the day's stock exercise, taking a moment to review her net worth: $327 million. A quick internet search confirmed Jason Reynolds' estimated worth at around $250 million, much of it tied up in Reynolds Enterprises stock, which had been declining steadily. "How interesting," she murmured, hanging the red dress on her closet door for tomorrow. In the morning, as her driver pulled the gleaming black Tesla SUV to the front of her house, Emily adjusted her diamond pendant, another recent acquisition, celebrating Turner Biologics' breakthrough patent approval. The triplets emerged from the house, all wearing tailored suits that highlighted their transition from boys to young men. "Ready?" she asked, surveying them with pride. They nodded in unison, a habit from infancy they'd never quite abandoned. As the car pulled away, Emily gazed back at the house that had been their home for 7 years. Soon they would leave it behind, not because of Jason's development company, but because she had chosen something better for them. "The life has a sense of humor," she murmured, adjusting her diamond necklace before the limousine merged into traffic. "Let's see who's boring and worthless now." While the inevitable encounter approached through the crowded ballroom, Emily couldn't foresee that the true bombshell wouldn't be her financial success, but the 3 living proofs of 14 years of absence walking confidently at her side. While the inevitable encounter approached through the crowded ballroom, Emily couldn't foresee that the true bombshell wouldn't be her financial success, but the 3 living proofs of 14 years of absence walking confidently at her side. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the polished veneer of power. Emily guided her sons through the crowd, aware of the subtle shift in energy as they passed, heads turning, conversations pausing. Her crimson dress made a statement against the sea of conservative blues and grays, its architectural lines emphasizing the confidence that now defined her. "There's Dr. Nakamura," Andrew whispered, nodding toward a distinguished Japanese scientist conversing near the champagne fountain. "He's on the Carnegie Hall selection committee." "And the MIT president is by the east entrance," Alexander added, his eyes cataloging the room's notable figures with characteristic precision. Adam remained quiet, his gaze fixed on his phone. "The app crashed again," he murmured. "Too many downloads after that education blog mentioned it." Emily squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "Technical problems born of success, the best kind of problem to have." A flash of movement across the room caught Emily's attention. Standing in a circle of admiring executives was Jason Reynolds. 14 years had added distinguished silver at his temples but done little to diminish his commanding presence. His custom-tailored suit and characteristic stance, slightly leaning forward, commanding attention, remained unchanged from her memories. For a suspended moment, Emily allowed herself to truly look at him. The man who had once been the center of her world. The man who had dismissed her as worthless while unknowingly walking away from the 3 extraordinary young men now standing beside her. As if sensing her scrutiny, Jason paused mid-sentence. His gaze swept the room and locked with Emily's. The recognition wasn't immediate. A flicker of polite curiosity transformed into confusion, then dawning comprehension. The color drained from his face so rapidly that the investor beside him asked if he needed water. Emily held his gaze with practiced composure, offering nothing more than a slight professional nod before deliberately turning her attention to the approaching Pfizer CEO. "Emily, there you are!" James Thornton exclaimed, extending his hand. "And these must be the remarkable young men I've heard so much about." As they exchanged pleasantries, Emily remained acutely aware of Jason's gaze burning into her back. She guided her sons and James toward the stage area, where the announcements would soon begin. "We're seated in the front row," she explained to the boys. "The press release goes out at 11 precisely, coordinated with my remarks." The next hour unfolded with choreographed precision. The conference organizer welcomed attendees, introduced various speakers, and highlighted the event's corporate sponsors. Emily sat perfectly poised, reviewing her notes while occasionally scanning the room. Jason had positioned himself at an angle where he could observe her without being obvious, his usual confident expression replaced by something approaching shock. When James Thornton took the stage to announce Pfizer's acquisition of Turner Biologics for $800 million, the applause was thunderous. As Emily joined him at the podium, press cameras clicked in rapid succession. "Turner Biologics represents everything we seek in an innovation partner," James declared. "Under Emily Turner's visionary leadership, they've revolutionized the approach to autoimmune treatments, creating therapies that will improve millions of lives globally." From her elevated position, Emily could see Jason clearly, his fingers white-knuckled around his champagne flute, his expression a complex mixture of disbelief and something that might have been regret. After the formal announcements concluded, attendees dispersed into networking clusters throughout the ballroom. Emily circulated strategically, accepting congratulations and introducing her sons to key industry figures. The triplets handled themselves with remarkable poise, each demonstrating the unique talents they had cultivated. The inevitable confrontation arrived during the dessert service. Emily was discussing implementation timelines with Pfizer's research director when she sensed a presence at her elbow. The conversation naturally paused, and she turned to find Jason standing uncomfortably close. "Emily," he said, his voice a careful mixture of surprise and warmth. "What an extraordinary coincidence." "Jason," she replied evenly, her tone professional but distant. "Not much of a coincidence in Boston's biotechnology circles. It's a relatively small community." His eyes searched her face, looking for traces of the young waitress he had known. Finding none, he shifted his weight, suddenly less certain than the man who had commanded the room earlier. You look fantastic," he managed, the compliment sounding hollow even to his own ears. "What you've built is truly impressive." "Thank you," Emily replied, maintaining her composure. "You appear exactly as I remember." The subtle implication that he hadn't changed, hadn't grown, wasn't lost on him. His smile faltered slightly as he reached for something else to say. Before he could continue, 3 identical teenagers approached, all wearing suits that complemented Emily's dress. "Mom," Andrew began confidently, "Dr. Nakamura wants to discuss the arrangement I proposed for the opening piece. And the MIT president is asking about my application for the summer research program," Alexander added, tablet in hand. "The app crashed again with all the downloads," Adam completed, showing his phone screen filled with error messages. Jason froze, his eyes darting between the 3 faces that were unmistakable reflections of his own at 14. The same jawline, the same intense eyes, the same athletic build that had made him captain of his prep school lacrosse team. "Boys," Emily said calmly, "this is Jason Reynolds, a former acquaintance." Jason extended a visibly trembling hand. "You're triplets?" "Evidently," Alexander replied, his tone carrying the same slight arrogance Jason had wielded in his youth. The tense exchange was interrupted by a reporter from the Wall Street Journal who approached with recorder in hand. "Mr. Reynolds, we're curious about an interesting coincidence," the journalist began. "Your company recently acquired properties occupied by Turner Biologics employees, including Ms. Turner's own residence. Is this part of some competitive strategy?" Jason's composure cracked completely. He looked from the reporter to Emily, realization dawning that she knew about the Burlington development. There are numerous development opportunities in the greater Boston area," he stammered. "Standard business expansion." Emily studied him calmly, the pieces falling into place. "I believe Mr. Reynolds can better explain this curious coincidence than I can," she said smoothly. "Perhaps related to the fact that he's never met his 3 sons in 14 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Around them, conversations died as people realized something significant was unfolding. The triplets stared at their mother, then at Jason, comprehension dawning in 3 identical expressions. "He's our father?" Adam asked, his sensitive nature making the question sound like physical pain. Jason's face had gone from pale to ashen. "Emily, please," he whispered urgently. "Can we discuss this privately? Please?" Emily maintained perfect composure, decades of controlled dignity radiating from her. "There's nothing to discuss privately that can't be said here," she replied. "You chose to abandon me when I was pregnant because I was boring and worthless. You said I would never be the wife you needed to get to the top. Well, here we are. It seems I got there without you." The reporter's eyes widened as he recognized the developing story. Other journalists, sensing blood in the water, began to drift closer. The Pfizer executives observed with fascinated expressions, while the triplets formed an instinctive protective formation around their mother. "Please," Jason repeated, his arrogance evaporated completely. "I was young, stupid. I didn't know—" "No," Emily interrupted, her voice steady but carrying clearly to those nearby. "You knew exactly what you were doing. And now we're all seeing exactly who you are." Jason's gaze darted desperately between the 3 boys, his sons, cataloging the features they had inherited from him. Andrew's confident stance, Alexander's analytical stare, Adam's artistic sensitivity visible even in how he held himself. "I had no idea there were 3, he whispered, as if this somehow excused his absence. "No one told me." "You made it abundantly clear you wanted nothing to do with any of us," Emily replied. "I respected your choice." The triplets watched this exchange with varying reactions. Andrew's expression hardened into contempt, Alexander observed with clinical detachment, and Adam's eyes filled with the pain of 14 years of absence suddenly personified before him. "Can we leave now?" Andrew asked his mother, deliberately turning his back on Jason. "Of course," Emily replied, gathering her clutch. "We've made our announcements. The rest is just formality." As they prepared to depart, Jason made one final desperate attempt. "Wait, please. At least let me explain. Let me get to know them. They're my sons too." Emily paused, studying the man she had once loved with cool detachment. "That's not my decision anymore," she said finally. "They're 14 now, old enough to decide for themselves if they want to know you." She turned to her sons. "This is your choice, not mine. Whatever you decide, I'll support you." The triplets exchanged glances, that silent communication they had perfected since infancy passing between them. It was Alexander who spoke, his logical mind finding the most practical solution. "We'll consider it," he said formally, as if addressing a business proposition rather than a father, "after we've had time to process this information." "I'd like your contact details," Andrew added, his natural leadership asserting itself. "If we decide to communicate, it will be on our terms." Adam said nothing, but his expressive eyes spoke volumes as he studied the man whose features he saw every day in the mirror. The reporters, recognizing the public portion of the drama had concluded, began dispersing to file their stories. The Pfizer executives discreetly moved away, giving the family space. Jason stood alone, watching as Emily and the triplets walked toward the exit, their unified front a stark illustration of the family unit that had formed without him. In the limousine, silence reigned for several minutes. Finally, Adam spoke, his voice small but steady. "Did you always know we would meet him today?" Emily shook her head. "I knew he would be at the conference. I didn't plan for him to learn about you this way." "He looked like he'd seen ghosts," Alexander observed clinically. "Triple ghosts, specifically." "Are we in trouble?" Andrew asked practically. "With the press, I mean." Emily squeezed his hand. "No, we've done nothing wrong. Your father will face some difficult questions, but that's not our concern." As the limousine glided through Boston's streets, Emily watched her sons processing this seismic shift in their understanding of themselves. Whatever came next would be complicated, messy, and entirely unpredictable, much like life itself. While they exited the hotel with dignity, Emily couldn't imagine the tsunami that would hit Jason the following morning. Devastating headlines, plummeting stocks, and a desperate visit that would change the final course of this story. While they exited the hotel with dignity, Emily couldn't imagine the tsunami that would hit Jason the following morning. Devastating headlines, plummeting stocks, and a desperate visit that would change the final course of this story. The Boston Globe landed on doorsteps across the city at 5:30 the next morning. The headline sprawled across the front page in bold, accusatory type: "CEO abandons triplets, tries to evict family 14 years later." Beneath it, a photograph captured the exact moment of Jason's recognition. His face ashen, champagne flute tilted dangerously, while Emily stood composed in her crimson dress, 3 identical teenagers at her side. By 6:15, the Wall Street Journal had published their own version online: Reynolds versus Turner, corporate warfare or personal vendetta. The business angle focused on the curious timing of Reynolds Enterprises' Burlington development announcement, coinciding with Turner Biologics' landmark acquisition. Emily watched the storm unfold from her kitchen island, sipping coffee while scrolling through notifications that multiplied by the second. The triplets, exhausted from the previous day's emotional upheaval, still slept upstairs. 37 missed calls, she murmured, setting her phone face down on the counter. The quiet morning offered a momentary respite before decisions would need to be made, statements crafted, and 3 teenage boys guided through the public explosion of their private history. Across town, Jason Reynolds faced a very different morning. Emergency alerts had summoned him to Reynolds Enterprises headquarters at dawn, where his executive team and crisis management firm awaited with grim expressions. "The stock is down 9% in pre-market trading," his CFO reported, sliding a tablet across the conference table. "We're projecting 17% by closing bell if we don't get ahead of this. Your personal reputation affects the company valuation directly," his PR director added. "Major shareholders are demanding a statement." Jason loosened his tie, sleep deprivation evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "Draft something appropriate. I was young, made a mistake, regret lost time with my children, look forward to building relationship, etc." "There's more," his assistant interrupted, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Ms. Prescott is on line 1. Jason closed his eyes briefly. Vanessa Prescott, Manhattan socialite, Art Foundation director, and as of 3 months ago, his fiancée. The diamond on her finger had cost more than most Americans' annual salary. Before he could reach for the phone, his assistant winced. "She's also on Instagram Live." The screen on the wall flickered to life, displaying Vanessa's perfectly composed face addressing her 300,000 followers. "I believe in transparency, which is why I'm sharing that my engagement to Jason Reynolds has ended. I cannot align myself with someone whose character demonstrates such profound moral failure." By 8:30, Reynolds' failure was trending nationally. Back in Burlington, Emily assembled breakfast as the triplets descended one by one, drawn by the scent of pancakes, their traditional comfort food since childhood. "You're all over the internet," Alexander announced, tablet in hand as he slid onto a kitchen stool. "The stock gossip channels are calling it the Reynolds Reckoning." "Are we in trouble?" Adam asked quietly, his sensitive nature most affected by the previous day's confrontation. Emily set a plate before him, squeezing his shoulder. "No, sweetheart. We've done nothing wrong. This attention will pass." "He deserves it," Andrew stated flatly, his protective instincts fully engaged. "He abandoned us, then tried to bulldoze our house. Karma." Emily studied her eldest son, seeing the hardness in his expression that concerned her. "Anger is natural, but don't let it define you," she said carefully. "His choices don't determine your character." Alexander, eternally analytical, scrolled through news reports. Reynolds Enterprises stock is in freefall. They've lost nearly $200 million in market capitalization since markets opened. "That's not our concern," Emily replied firmly. "Now, who has homework to finish before Monday?" The conversation shifted to more immediate matters: Alexander's debate tournament, Andrew's violin practice schedule, Adam's app updates. Emily marveled at their resilience, their ability to compartmentalize the emotional earthquake of meeting their father with the practical demands of daily life. After breakfast, Alexander lingered in the kitchen while his brothers dispersed to their rooms. "I found his contact information," he said without preamble. "Personal email, private cell number, home address." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Should I ask how you obtained this?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Probably not, but it wasn't illegal. Mostly." She accepted the neatly printed information he offered. "I'll keep this safe. If and when you boys decide you want contact, we'll discuss it together." Alexander nodded, then hesitated. Was he always like that? So desperate-looking? Emily considered the question carefully. "No, the man I knew was confident to the point of arrogance. Yesterday was likely the first time in his life he confronted consequences he couldn't control." "I've been researching him for years," Alexander admitted. "His company's acquisition record, management style, public appearances. I wanted to understand what kind of person could leave and never look back." Emily felt her heart constrict. "And what did you conclude?" that he's efficient but not innovative, decisive but not visionary. Alexander's assessment was clinical, detached. His success comes from leveraging existing structures rather than creating new ones, unlike you. The simple comparison, so factual yet profound, brought unexpected tears to Emily's eyes. She pulled her middle son into a hug. "You are extraordinary, Alexander. All three of you are." The doorbell rang at precisely 3 o'clock that afternoon. Emily glanced through the side window, momentarily startled by the sight of Jason Reynolds standing on her porch. Gone was the Maserati that had occasionally appeared in business profiles. Gone, too, was the effortless arrogance that had once defined him. He held an expensive bouquet and a leather portfolio, shifting his weight with uncharacteristic nervousness. Emily opened the door, maintaining the composed expression that had become her professional signature. "Jason." "Emily." He seemed unsure whether to extend his hand, ultimately offering the flowers instead. "May I come in, please?" She studied him, the designer suit that couldn't disguise his exhaustion, the carefully arranged hair now slightly disheveled. "Why are you here?" "To apologize, to try to explain." He gestured to the portfolio. "And to cancel the development project. The property is yours. No conditions." Emily considered shutting the door, ending this intrusion before it complicated her son's lives further. Instead, she stepped aside. "The boys need to decide if they want to meet you. It's their choice, not mine." Jason entered cautiously, eyes cataloging the comfortable but elegantly appointed living room. Family photographs covered one wall, the triplets through various stages of childhood, always with Emily, occasionally with Margaret, never with him. "They look happy," he said softly. "They are," Emily confirmed, not offering him a seat. "Wait here." Upstairs, she knocked gently on each bedroom door. "Jason Reynolds is downstairs," she explained simply. "You don't have to see him. This is entirely your decision." The boys gathered in the hallway, conferring in hushed tones. After a brief discussion, they descended the stairs together, a unified front, as always. Jason stood straighter as they entered, his expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. The resemblance between him and his sons was even more striking in the natural light of the living room, 4 variations of the same genetic blueprint, separated only by age and life experience. "Hello," he offered awkwardly. "We know who you are," Andrew interrupted, arms crossed defensively. "Why are you here now? After 14 years? Emily moved to the periphery, allowing her sons to navigate this moment on their own terms while remaining close enough to intervene if needed. "I came to apologize," Jason began, his practiced corporate confidence nowhere in evidence, "and to tell you that I've canceled the Burlington development project. Your home is safe." "Because he's losing in the stock market and needs a redemption story," Alexander interjected, echoing his statement from the previous day. "Reynolds Enterprises lost $200 million in market value since yesterday." Jason flinched visibly. That's not why I'm here." "It's not fair," Adam said quietly, speaking directly to Jason for the first time. "We grew up without a father." The simple statement, delivered without accusation but with profound sadness, seemed to affect Jason more deeply than his brother's sharper comments. "You're right," he acknowledged, meeting Adam's gaze. "It's not fair. Nothing I can say will make it fair." He reached for the portfolio, removing several documents. "I've brought some things, college funds I've established for each of you, information about summer programs at companies where I have connections, plans for trips we could take if you'd be interested." "We don't need your money," Andrew stated flatly. "Mom has provided everything we've ever needed." "I know," Jason admitted. "I can see that." Alexander's analytical mind focused on the central question. Why now? Why after 14 years? Before Jason could formulate a response, Emily's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then excused herself to take the call in the kitchen. The brief conversation concluded with a smile she couldn't suppress. Returning to the living room, she addressed her sons. "The purchase of the Beacon Hill house has been finalized. We can move next week if we want." "Beacon Hill?" Jason echoed, surprise evident in his voice. "The historic mansion on Louisburg Square?" "Yes," Emily confirmed casually. "It belonged to one of Reynolds Enterprises' directors until recently. He needed to liquidate assets quickly after the stock collapse. I bought it outright." The realization hit Jason visibly. The house he had once mentioned to colleagues as the ultimate symbol of Boston's success now belonged to the woman he had dismissed as worthless. "Emily, he began, then faltered. "I really made the greatest mistake of my life." "No," she corrected him gently. "Your mistake was thinking my value depended on your validation. It never did." The simple truth hung in the air between them, more powerful than recrimination or anger could ever be. 2 weeks later, the Turner family moved into their new Beacon Hill mansion. Emily sat in the elegantly appointed office overlooking Boston Common, finalizing documents that would allow for paternity testing and possible supervised visits between Jason and the boys, if they wished it. At his now lonely Back Bay apartment, Jason scrolled through online photographs of the triplets, science fairs, violin recitals, debate competitions. An entire family that had flourished without him. An empire built by someone he had discarded. His fortune diminishing while hers grew. On a rainy night that echoed the one 14 years earlier, Emily stood at the window of her new home, watching Boston's lights shimmer through the downpour. There was no bitterness in her heart, only a sense of completion. She hadn't built her success as revenge, but as affirmation of her own worth. Her phone rang, Pfizer offering her a position on their global board with 8-figure compensation. As she concluded the call, a news notification appeared. Reynolds Enterprises faces restructuring after 30% stock decline. Emily set down her phone and smiled. She didn't need Jason's downfall to validate her rise. Her sweetest victory wasn't financial, but seeing 3 extraordinary young men growing with values he had never taught them. Years later, when asked in her best-selling autobiography about the exact moment she knew she had won, Emily wouldn't mention the $1 million merger or the Beacon Hill mansion, but rather the day she looked at her sons and realized they had learned the most valuable lesson. A person's true worth is never defined by those who abandon them, but by who they choose to become. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.